with me to the book of Joel. Joel chapter 2, verse 21 through 27. The book of Joel, 21 through 27. Joel 2, 21 through 27. Okay? It's on the screen for those of you who need to look at there as well. Okay? Joel chapter 2, verse 21 through 27. Now here's the reading of God's word. Do not be afraid, land of Judah. Be glad and rejoice. Surely the Lord has done great things. Do not be afraid, you wild animals, for the pastures in the wilderness are becoming green. The trees are bearing their fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their riches. Be glad, people of Zion. Rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you the autumn rains because he is faithful. He sends you abundant showers, both autumn and spring rains as before. The threshing floors will be filled with grain. The vats will overflow with new wine and oil. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten, the great locust and the young locust, and the other locusts and the locust swarms, my great army that I sent among you. You will have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be shamed. Then you will know that I am in Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and that there is no other. Never again will my people be ashamed. In 1874, swarms of grasshoppers swept through parts of the Great Plains of North America, and it laid waste to crops, wood, and paper. These kinds of insects, a grasshopper, individually maybe an inch and a half long. You think one grasshopper, it can't do that much damage. But when they are in numbers of hundreds and hundreds of millions, they can have incredible potential to destroy thousands of acres of crops. People reported in 1874 that the land appeared as if it had been ravaged by wildfire. The renewal of the land and the restoration took many years. The people of Judah and the prophet Joel could report on this type of destruction firsthand. They witnessed this type of destruction. Both the people and the land needed wondrous and miraculous renewal. Joel directed his prophetic message to the people of Judah, and in particular to the city of Jerusalem. And the book of Joel opens by describing a plague of insects that destroyed the crops of Judah. The once fruitful land of Judah became barren by these destructive insects. Because of the land's desolation, the people of Judah lived in famine and they lived in want. Joel interpreted the destruction as the consequence of Judah's sin. And he called his audience to return to the Lord and repent. When Joel is writing, when he looks out, all he sees is destruction. They had just experienced all this, and all he sees is destruction. And yet, Joel looked forward to restoration as he writes about God's response to the current state of his people. Our passage today helps us to see God's grace and compassion as he points to what lays ahead. Several points for us this morning is this. First, God commands us to be glad and rejoice. Look at verse 21 and 23. Do not be afraid, land of Judah. Be glad and rejoice. Surely the Lord has done great things. In verse 23, be glad, people of Zion. Rejoice in the Lord your God. God commands his people to rejoice, be glad. But this is coming at a time when the land was desolate. It was destruction. What is there to be glad about? What can they find to rejoice in? Everywhere they look is destruction. They're to be, glad about destruction? They're to be glad about having no food, about being hungry? There isn't much to be glad about or rejoice when they're looking at their current situation. But as I mentioned, Joel is not looking at the current situation. He's looking ahead. He's looking forward to the restoration that God promised. He's telling Judah to look forward in faith. That's easier said than done, isn't it? It's always difficult to look to the future in the midst of suffering. In the midst of pain, in the midst of hardships, we can't look to the future. Even if we look to the future, we think, how much can it change from our current situation? But he says, look ahead with anticipation. Look ahead in faith. When you plan a vacation, or when you have a trip coming up, don't you look forward to that with anticipation? Some of you look forward to spring vacation, summer vacation. I mean, I look forward to summer vacation. I'm like, yes, nothing to do. I can sleep in, I can do whatever I want for 3 months. I loved summer vacation. For some of you, summer vacation is not very vacation because our church has summer school, and you're forced to come. I'm sorry. But as a parent, I love summer school. But when we have something planned, when we have a trip planned, don't we look forward to it with a great anticipation? As the weeks and days go by, you can't contain that excitement. Maybe you're even counting down the days. And the night before, what happens? You can't sleep. You're so excited. You have a hard time sleeping. I know it's not just me. I'm sure many of you are that way. If you have something planned for tomorrow, you're leaving somewhere tomorrow, Hawaii, Korea, I don't know, somewhere warm. If you're leaving tomorrow tonight, you're not going to be sleeping. You're going to be packing, you're going to get ready. That's the kind of looking forward, I think, the anticipation that Joel is telling Judah to do. It's really difficult because I think it takes a special faith to look out into the barrenness, to look at the destruction, and to see bountiful crops and lush greens. Your eyes tell you it's barrenness, but in faith, you're supposed to look out and look forward to what? Circumstances being vastly different. And it takes certain type of faith to praise God for a restoration that we cannot see with our own eyes. To trust God's promises. This is difficult. No matter how hard they tried, there may be a select few who are able to have that type of looking forward faith. But this is what God says. The destroyed land will be made fruitful again. Be glad and rejoice. We must believe that the Lord will do great things in and through our lives. We should be glad and rejoice before He has done anything. Looking forward in faith. You see, Joel had the eyes of faith. And with the eye of faith, Joel could already see it happening. All around him were lush, fruitful pastures and trees that God had restored after destruction of the locusts. There are people who have the ability to see. Down in Southern Oregon, there's a golf course called Bandon Dunes. And over the years, they have put many, many different courses together. But I saw the pictures of Bandon Dunes before a golf course was ever built, the first one. You know what I saw? Overgrown weeds and sand. That's all I saw. In my eyes, that's all I saw. But to the architect and to the people who thought about that vision, they saw incredible potential for not just one, but multiple golf courses, each with its own unique characteristics. And today, I believe there's like 4 golf courses there, plans for even several more. They're able to see something. When we look out into the destruction, when we look at our hardship, what do we see? Hardship. We cannot think about a moment where something else can possibly be. But with eyes of faith as such as Joel had, he looked out into the current situation and he saw what? Lush green trees, fruitful harvest. Why? Because of the promised restoration of the Lord. That's why he can say, be glad and rejoice. Be glad and rejoice. Second, God promises to restore what was taken away. Look at verse 23. Second half of verse 23, it reads this: For he has given you the autumn rains because he is faithful. He sends you abundant showers, both autumn and spring rains as before. As before. Just like in the past, rains are coming. Their land laid desolate and destroyed. When we read verse 23, we can conclude there must have been no rain as well. Destruction, famine. But the promise to restore what was taken away. The return of the rain is significant. Rain was needed to water the crops. No water means nothing to grow. You can plant, but without the rains, there will be no growth. If you take away the rains, if you take away the water, it's really difficult for any farmer to have success. In the last few years, the western U.S. has experienced very dry weather. And some parts of Washington, Oregon, California were in what the category extreme drought conditions for up until most of last year. However, things have improved drastically in the past month and a half or so, especially in California. Historic rains have improved the drought situation. I don't think there's any region in the West anymore that is in extreme drought condition. That's how much rain has come. December into January. If you kind of reflect, in January here it was warm and it was wet. But a lot of rainstorms went through California. The rains are important, the rains are helpful, they're welcomed. But more than the rains, it's the snow in the mountains of California that has the greatest potential for long-term benefit. Areas of Sierra Nevada mountains in California are plus 200% of normal for this time of the year in snowfall or snowpack. Lake Tahoe, around Christmas time, they set a record. In 12 hours, they received 22 inches of snow. In 12 hours. I would love for 22 inches of snow in the next 12 hours, right? Record snowfall, record rain. And all the snow that's in that area, Mammoth right now has the deepest snow base in all of America. Mammoth Ski Resort. They have over 400 inches of snow this year. I've seen pictures of people are standing in like piles. There's a picture in Mammoth of a Carl's Jr. restaurant. You see no building. All you see is a little ordering menu window, and snow is piled up all around. Incredible amounts of snow. All of that will melt later, and it'll feed all of the systems, and there will be water for irrigation. Rains are critical. The promise of rain is welcome news because it means that things can return to normal. Look at verse 25 and 26. God says, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten, the great locust and the young locust, the other locust, the locust one. Scholars have no idea what all of this means, okay? But anyways, we know that locusts came, okay? Grasshoppers. Verse 26, you will have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be shamed. Not only will God send the rain, the people would also, this is the picture, once again experience fruitful crops. God promised that they will be full and they will have plenty to eat. It's a stark contrast to their current situation where they're hungry and they have nothing to eat. He says, no, there's going to come a time in the future. You will have so much food. You will eat and you will be full. It's very likely that very few people at this time when Joel is writing these words, when he's giving these words, that there was anyone that was full. That's how bad the situation was. God judged Israel for their sins. Judgment was in the form of disasters from the locusts. It devoured the land and also the foreign nations who conquered them. But God revealed that a time will come when He will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. It's not a repayment of a debt that is owed. God didn't owe them anything. They were warned, and yet they still sinned. And the disaster was their own doing. They were experiencing God's judgment for their choices. Yes, God sent the locusts as judgment, but God promised to repay the damage that they had done to the land, to the crops. The promise of fruitful harvest and years of having plenty of food to eat is reassuring and comforting. God is demonstrating His grace and compassion for His people. They will remember God's faithfulness, all the amazing miracles and wonders done by God for His people. This follows God's history and pattern of working wonders for His people. God demonstrated His covenant love to His people despite their sinfulness. God promised to restore what was taken away. He says, be glad and rejoice. What was taken away will be restored. But perhaps more than that, which leads to a third point, is this. As a result of God's faithfulness then, God's people will place their confidence in God once again. Judah has much to look forward to. The devastation brought on by the locusts, the famine that resulted from having nothing to eat, will be all in the past. You and I, we have never experienced such destruction. Living in Portland over the last 8 years, we have been, closest thing I can think of is like either flooding or some kind of wildfire, right? But it hasn't really affected our homes or our neighborhoods. Close, it came really close. Estacada, right? And that's like the closest we've seen to fires that have kind of destroyed. But there are other places. What's that city called? Paradise, California, wasn't it? Where the entire town was burned to the ground about 5 or 6 years ago. No structure remained. Not a single house survived. So that's the kind of devastation that basically occurred here in Judah. But we are relatively free from that. However, modern examples like Paradise, California exist. In the year of 1816, the year has been dubbed the year with no summer, 1816. There was a volcano in Indonesia which had erupted the prior year, 1815. And the volcanic ash from the eruption went into the sky, and it basically covered the northern hemisphere of the globe. So Northern Europe, North America, and all around. It circled and obstructed sunlight of the entire northern hemisphere. Daily average temperatures, as a result, dropped significantly. A New York newspaper in 1816 noted that parts of the state of New York saw hard frost during every month of that summer. Many residents of New England froze to death, starved, or suffered from severe malnutrition as snowstorms hit the area even in the summer months. As you can imagine, crop failures and food shortages were widespread and unavoidable. In some countries, rioting and looting became common as people were desperate for food. Can you imagine waking up to such situations? Power went out in our house last month for 5 or 6 hours. Oh man, what an inconvenience. We don't deal with natural disasters here in Portland. We're really shielded from any kind of those kind of things. Tornadoes, we get tornadoes here, but they're F0s. 0 is the weakest, F5 is the strongest. We've had some F1s, but like some of the destructive ones that you hear about in the Midwest, those are like 3, 4s, and occasionally you get a 5. We don't deal with that. We don't deal with earthquakes. We get a little bit of a shaking from time to time. Flooding, most of us live in nice suburb areas where we don't have to deal with that. Overall, we don't deal with these natural disasters, and I'm thankful for that. But however, it may not be natural disasters, but we do have desperate moments that we experience. We have desperate moments and situations where we have to live through. Going to the store and not finding what you need, what you really need, a critical item, is somewhat occurring even today. There was medication shortage. You hear about shortages even to this day, supply chain issues. It's crazy. There's certain foods that we like to eat. We go to the grocery store. Sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. At Trader Joe's, every time we get to the cash register, they ask, "Did you find everything?" Every time I'm like, "No." They're like, "Oh, what are you looking for?" And I tell them, they're like, "Oh, yeah." Green onions, they get 1 box a day, 18 of them. We go at 9 o'clock. I go drop off the kids at 8 a.m., and I go to Trader Joe's at 8:05. Why? Green onions. I buy 1 green onion, and I'm out of there. There's certain things that we're looking for. Sometimes we're like, okay, we can get by. I can go pay a little bit more and go to another store and find it. But do you remember the baby formula shortage that happened? I talked to mothers who were like, oh yeah, we go to the store, one store after another. I'm going and going, empty shelf everywhere. Then you go and you find some, and your initial reaction is to take it all. But you think, there are many other people like me. I just need to take what I... And I heard stories of women, mothers who are sharing milk to those who have nothing. It was crazy. I cannot believe it. Those are desperate times. So you and I, although we don't have the desperate situation of destruction from locusts, circumstances in our life create desperate moments. When the locusts swept through the land, the devastation was so great that one wondered, would there ever be restoration? Would there ever be recovery? So when God promises to restore everything, this is significant. He will not only send the rains, but there will become a time when you will be full, and you will have plenty to eat. I will restore all the years that the locusts have eaten. Look at verse 27. Then you will know that I am in Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and that there is no other. Never again will my people be ashamed. When the land is restored, when God brings restoration, then the people will know that God is in Israel. They will know that I am in Israel. No doubt that the people believed that since they were experiencing hardship, that God had deserted them. This was common occurrence, not just in the time of Israel and all of the cycles of judges and judgment. Isn't that true for us today? When we're experiencing the desperate situations, when we're experiencing the hardships, there's always the voice that says, you think God is still listening? You think God is still there? When they are experiencing the outpouring of God's grace, they will once again know that God is in their midst, that He is their God, and there is no one like Him. He will also take away the shame. They will no longer be shamed. No longer will other nations mock them for their apparent abandonment by their God. Your God can't do nothing for you. He's gone. Look at your current situation. No one to protect you. Israel, they suffered a lot. Much of it was their own doing. But when everything is restored, the nations will know the God of Israel has restored Israel once again. Israel can once again put their confidence in God, knowing that God is in their midst. In fact, they will be able to have confidence that God had never left. Even in times of famine, destruction of the land, God was always there. He is their God, and there is none like him. Let me invite the worship team up. What lesson can we take away from this today? Especially since most of us have never experienced such devastation. We've never had, well, most of us most likely, we've never had swarms of locusts come through our neighborhood and just eat everything. Last year, my parents had, they have a big garden, but last year, all of a sudden, a rabbit appeared out of nowhere. Abby loves rabbits. I couldn't kill this thing. I was like, oh. So one day I remember we were outside, the rabbit was there. And I had chased it. I cornered it, and I had a stick in my hand. I was chasing it down, and I have it cornered, and Abby comes out. I'm like, no, go back inside. Because I was determined to just take care of it at that moment. Why? Because that rabbit was eating everything. All the hard work, my parents, my mom and dad, planting all of the stuff. Rabbit took it down in a day. We don't experience this type of widespread destruction. So what lesson can we take away from passages like Joel? I think it's this morning. And I want to leave us with this. I think we must remember the importance of maintaining hope during seasons of suffering. The importance of maintaining hope in the seasons of suffering. We've all been there. We're in there. We will go through it. I'm reminded of Matthew's dad. He went to see his dad yesterday. Many of you guys in this chat room know his dad has cancer, and he started hospice care, and the doctor has said maybe 1 to 6 months. I recall the message and the words of his father, who said, "You know what? I'm okay. Yes, it's stage 4 cancer, but he said it's also stage 4 gospel." And I will preach the gospel, and I will share the gospel to the day that the Lord calls me. There are people around us dealing with cancer, other ailments, other sicknesses, death even. We must remember the importance of maintaining hope during the seasons of suffering. We remember that Joel's words were directed to a people who were in the midst of hardship. In the midst of hardship, he said, look, I want you to be able to see with the eyes of faith and look forward to the day of restoration. That when that day happens, it's not an if. When that day happens, you will know that I am in Israel, that I am your God, and there is none like me. Maintaining hope in the seasons of suffering. Joel promised the people that hope was possible in the midst of disaster and suffering, all because of God's great work of renewal. God is in our midst. There is none like God. So whatever hardship, whatever suffering that you are experiencing, whatever it is that you are going through, whatever it is that you have experienced in the past, or whatever it is that you will experience in the future, we must maintain hope. Not because of our own abilities, but because we have a God. We have a God who's able to see very differently than you and I are able to see. With eyes of faith, Joel looked into the future day of restoration and renewal. In the midst of suffering, in the midst of hardships, my desire is that God will give you that same type of eyes of faith.